Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our live show as well, Save Our Sanity. So firstly, would like to wish all of you thank you and welcome in joining our live stream for today. Now, my name is Chantel, and I will be your host for today. Now, the topic that we will be sharing for today would be, let me share with you, here it goes. Dangers of internet. How to protect yourself and your loved ones. Yeah. So I'm actually from People Have Consulting, and I'll probably share with you a little bit on your you're probably thinking like why do we have this and why do we probably um do this, right? Okay. So now what we're gonna do is just hold on here. I would go in here. Hold on. Let me show you as well on what we have on People Have Consulting. Yep, here we go. And here, now, what we actually do is we have a lot of customized development programs, such as leadership and culture, and also culture and the learning app in the HR automation space as well. Now, before that we go on, actually, I probably think of some of you probably think about why do we actually want to have this, right? So let me go and show you a video about this, yeah? Why we have the Save My Sanity webinars. Now, let me hold on. And yeah, sorry, the our my internet connection's a little bit spotty, so let me go through with you. Yeah. And here it is. Actually, this is the kind of reason why that we came up with the Save My Sanity webinar. And this is actually our 8th webinar that we do coming up from the struggles of working mom. And today's topic, you can actually see that we are all using internet so much, right? I mean, for schools, for shopping, I mean, basically everything, online banking and stuff like that. And I would think that this is really important for every one of us to know that what is the risk of using the internet. And therefore, today, I'm so thankful and so honored to actually have Sanjay, who's going to speak for us for today. And he will share with you all the dangers in the internet world and cybersecurity. So let me introduce a little bit about Sanjay before bringing Sanjay to come in. Hold on, let me share this on him. Now, Sanjay actually have more than 30 years, right? More than 30 years of experience in assurance, advisory, compliance experience. Basically, he is the cybersecurity expert and he does forensics in the digital world. Sounds like some secret service and now you can ask him those questions, right? Now he has worked in UK, Poland, and Netherlands for many years. I think more than 10 over years, more than 15 years overseas. He had leadership positions in Europe, in as well in the Africa region, as well as the Middle East. And now he's back here in Malaysia as the executive director and partner of BDO Malaysia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Sanjay in, right? Here. Sanjay, hello.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies. Good afternoon, Chantal, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for
Wow.
having me on today.
Thank you for supporting this initiative, Sanjay. Really, thank you so much. Now, before I quickly hand over to you, because we don't want to waste any time at all, what I will tell the viewers is that you can ask questions basically in two ways. Now, if you're watching from Facebook or YouTube, what you could do is you can comment in the chat box, right? In a comment box, and then we'll have a look at it, and Sanjay will either answer your questions during his presentation or will be after that. Or if you are shy, what we will have, I'll put it in a link later. You can actually type it into Slido, so that's anonymous. So you can put that questions in and we will pick it up from there and we will answer your questions from the Slido. So I'll put it up, give me probably about a minute. I'll put it up and then right now I will pass on the session to Sanjay. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Chantal. And good afternoon once again to everyone who's on. I'm going to proceed on the basis that my slides are visible to everybody because I can't. Oh, there they are. I can now kind of see them. Okay, so the introduction that you got to this session was really the dangers of the internet and how to keep yourself safe. And you will notice immediately from the title of my slide that I've changed it around a little bit to cybersecurity at a personal level. And really why I've done that is it kind of encapsulates what we're going to talk about this afternoon anyway. And that is the fact that you as an individual, you as families, your partners, your children, increasingly in the current environment are working from home. You're connecting to the outside world, either to further your professions or to run your businesses, or for the kids to go to school, and also for them to keep entertained, because let's face it, there is a limit to the amount that they can go out and be out and about physically. So everyone's doing more and more over the internet. And anything to do with connecting to the internet and securing yourself is in the sense of, or in the parlance of people like myself and my teams at BDO, we refer to that as cybersecurity. So what I really want to do today is take you on a whistle-stop tour. I have about 8 or 9 slides, and I'm going to labor some of them. I am going to breeze through some of them, so don't hesitate to ask questions if you need to on any of the content. But what I'd like to do today is give you an appreciation of what the threats are, okay? What the threats are and where the threats are coming from when you connect your device to the web, when you connect it to the internet, which, let's face it, is what you're doing. The minute you switch on your laptop, many of you here are sitting at home at the moment, connected through your Unify or your cell phone. Effectively, you are connected to the wider internet. And what I want to do is give you an overview of what the threats are that exist out there, who the players are, who are actually behind some of these threats, what some of them are after, and just the sheer amount of damage that they can cause. And after I've gone through all of that, I'll finish up by giving some pointers or having a discussion on what you can do to protect yourselves and protect your loved ones, not to mention protect the organizations that you work for while you are connected to the web. Much as I am, I'm part of BDO. I've been working from home since May. You can see my home office there. And I do client work. I do forensic investigations. I support audits and also do cybersecurity work from the comfort of my home, but connected to the internet, which means I'm also dealing with confidential data or information of clients that I have an obligation to keep confidential and secure. And I'm sure many of you have the same sort of considerations. Okay, so I'm going to launch into it. So cyber attacks. This is just a little introductory thing, but if we take cyber attacks at a glance, the best way to talk about it is by really giving you some statistics. Okay, there's been a 40% surge in global ransomware in 2020, and it's just going to get worse. 22% of consumers have detected malware of some form on their internet-connected devices. And I'm going to define what some of these terms are as we go through the presentation. Phishing is the topmost crime reported to the FBI in 2020. And again, I'll talk about what that is in a moment. There's a 67% increase in security breaches between 2014 and 2019. It's become even greater in the interim. And there is now something called stalkerware. Okay, software that goes on your devices and kind of follows you around and tracks where you've been to, and effectively tracks what you're doing. Now, the interesting thing about stalkerware is, yes, the instances of it have increased, but remember that most of us are our own worst stalkers. And again, I'll talk about that in a moment. And finally, one of the key takeaways, or one of the key points to note, is that social engineering is the most successful means of a data breach. I'm going to talk about data breaches in general, or breaches as a general term. And what I mean when I say a breach or a data breach is someone getting access to your device and therefore getting access to all the information on your device, whoever that someone is that you don't want to have on your device. So turning it around into some numbers, and yes, these numbers are very much intended to make you uh, stop and think. Okay, to catch your breath. I'm going to touch on a couple of them. $6 trillion is the expected cost of cyber attacks this year. That's no small sum. And if you think that's big business, that's big companies, it's not. You have a look down here at the point that I'm pointing to. The average ransomware demand is now $1,000 US. People like you and I, with our personal machines, with our personal equipment, with our personal data, we are the targets of ransomware. It's not just large companies. It's not just locking down large organizations' systems, but ransomware is increasingly becoming a very, very personal attack. The frequency of ransom attacks at the moment is roughly 1 every 6 seconds. So if you think about it, just in me telling you this, there have been 5 ransomware attacks that have happened somewhere around the world. Where do they come from? They come from the suspicious apps that we detect every day. Okay, 24,000 suspicious apps are detected and deleted daily from various devices, whether they're your laptop, your desktop, your phone, your iPad, your PlayStation, your Nintendo Switch, whatever it is. There are lots and lots of suspicious apps that are available that people will find a way to get onto your devices. 21% of user files are unprotected, which means they are prone to either being encrypted by ransomware or being stolen and therefore misused. And I'll come to what some of the motivations are in a moment. 60% of fraud, 60% of digital driven fraud today is originating from your trusty mobile phone. It is one of the weakest links in the personal electronic stable at the moment. We really, really have to pay a significant amount of attention to how we manage and use our phones and how we secure them. This one is really worrying. 90% is the number or the percentage of hackers or attackers at the moment who use some form of encryption. What does this mean? If they're using encryption, they're definitely a step ahead of us, because many of us are only beginning at a personal level. Okay, corporates have been in this for some time, but at a personal level, many of us are only just beginning to understand and get comfortable with the use of encryption personally. But the hackers are already using it. The attackers are already using it. And what this means is that it covers their tracks. Hackers or attackers who use encryption make it exceedingly difficult for them to be tracked down or traced, and for you to recover any of the lost data or any of the lost money that you have encountered. Right? And that jumps to the bottom here. 68% of funds that are lost, whether it's through an internet banking breach, or an ATM breach, or ransomware related, people paying ransom.
Oh, so
68%.
sorry. So
Sorry,
sorry,
go on.
Sanjay. I noticed that some people here that mentioned that they can't actually hear us. So that's why I'm kind of like just double checking with everybody else right here that
Oh dear.
are
Okay.
they able are they able to hear us? Some people actually say no, they are not able to hear us. Yeah,
Okay.
but I could hear
Can
you.
you hear
So
me?
yeah, I could hear you. I'm not sure
All
about
right.
some others that can't hear me. So let me just double check here.
All right.
Let me
I'll
say,
pause for a
are
minute.
you able to hear us now or see us? See us. Okay. Um, yeah, thank you, Betty. I'm not sure whether she is hearing us, able to hear us now. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that from, yeah, so Malsis actually is able to hear. Thank you very much. Yeah, because I noticed from this morning, now yes. All right, great. Because I
No,
noticed that
yes.
Unify
Okay.
has been having issues since the
All right.
morning, and not only for me, I noticed there's quite a number of people. Therefore, yeah. Oh, you can hear. Thank you very much. So sorry, Sanjay, I just had to come and interrupt. So I'll leave
No
it back
worries.
to you again.
Can
All
be
right, thank
heard
you everyone.
loud
Thanks,
and clear.
Vas.
Okay. Thank you, Vas. All righty. Now the question is, do I go back to the start of this deck or do I just continue? Um, I'm gonna elect to do a quick recap of this slide, and really what this slide is intending to demonstrate is just the sheer impact that that attackers are going to have on us individually and our organizations. So $6 trillion, the expected cost of cyber attacks in 2021, $1,000 the average ransomware demand, which means that it's a personal thing. It's not just corporates, it's not just large organizations that are being hit by ransomware. It is happening at the personal level as well, right? And amounts can be quite small on the big scale of things, but they can be quite large to you. It is worth noting, as I said earlier, that 68% of any funds lost through either attacks or ransomware are never ever recovered. So it's as good as gone. 60% of frauds or frauds of some sort are originating from mobile phones, from your mobile devices. And this points to a very, very critical thing. We all have at least one of these devices in our pockets. I know some of us who carry more than one, and we're not particularly good at securing them or what we do on them. And that's something that we really, really need to be careful of, because these are also the devices that we're putting in our children's hands. And if we're not managing them well, if we're not using them properly, they are going to be a major gap in our stance to protect ourselves. 90% is the number or the percentage of hackers or attackers who use encryption of some sort. And what this means is when they come and they've done their attack and they've gone, it's almost impossible to track them down. Okay, and that ties in with the funds never being recovered. So you really have to make sure, we really have to make sure that we are prepared against an attack happening, because once it happens, whatever damage is done is done. There is going to be a significant loss of time, possibly a significant loss of data, a loss of privacy as well, and potentially a loss of money that you're never ever going to recover. Okay. On average, 41% of systems deployed around the world, that includes the laptop that you may be watching this stream from, have some kind of loose end on them that poses a security risk or the opportunity for a security breach. That is frightening. And 98% of web applications are vulnerable to attacks in some shape or form. That again is another very, very frightening statistic. And all it really means is that you, ladies and gentlemen, need to take a much, much more proactive stance to protect yourselves, because you can't really disconnect from all this. There is a saying that's been going around since the mid late 1980s, that the only truly secure device is the one that is switched off and locked in a drawer. And now we certainly can't operate with our devices switched off and locked in a drawer. So we have to be aware of what the dangers are, where the dangers are coming from, and keenly aware of how to protect ourselves against them. Now, one of the things that's not on my slides that you do need to be aware of is this. In the big scheme of internet security, cybersecurity, whatever you want to call it, we, the good guys, are always on the back foot. As we patch and improve systems and our security, the attackers find new ways to attack systems, to probe for vulnerabilities in systems. And when I say systems, please don't think about these big servers in the basements of large buildings. Your mobile phone is a system. Your iPad is a system. Your kid's Nintendo Switch is a system. And there are people out there actively probing these systems all the time to find vulnerabilities. We, in the cybersecurity environment, identify vulnerabilities that exist because someone has already abused that vulnerability. That's how we identify it, which means we are only ever reactive. As we patch them, The bad guys come up with new stuff, new and innovative ways to compromise or break onto our systems, and then we have to play catch up to patch those as well. We are always reacting. We are always in the back foot. And that is the way it is going to remain for as long as we use connected devices, connected electronic devices of some sort. Okay, so again, it just underlines the need to be aware of what's happening and how to manage those devices and make sure they're protected. It's just a high level overview of where cyber attacks are coming from, the categories of cyber attacks by region. And although there is some difference in the some difference in the ranking of some of these, you see that they're pretty much the same, whether it is the global ranking, the Americas, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, or APAC. Mobile devices are the number one source of attacks. Okay, botnets are number three. I'll describe what bots are in a moment. They are number three. Banking is number four, and ransomware is down actually at number five. But remember that mobile devices are being used to deliver some of the other forms of attack that we're seeing here. I'm not going to touch on this too much, but if we look at these statistics here are approximately a year and a half old. I struggled for some reason to find more up-to-date statistics, but data records lost or stolen by industry. You see some interesting numbers here. 300 million records stolen from government, 134 million records stolen from healthcare, 84 million records stolen out of technology, 40 million records stolen out of retail. And remember, this information is about 2 years old. The current level of breaches is significantly more significant. And not all of these are coming from corporate breaches. Some of them are coming from breaches of individuals' machines as well. Why is this happening? Quite frankly, your data is big business. It is big business at a number of levels, whether it is getting you to part with your money, whether it is using your data to impersonate you to perpetrate another crime, or whether it's taking that data and marketing it or making it saleable to somebody else for whatever purposes they have. It is big, big business. Do not underestimate the draw of it. This is a very, 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 very busy slide. I'm not going to go through all of it, but what I really like you to focus on and understand is the top level here, and that is the threat landscape, where the attacks are coming from. Okay, state-sponsored. There is state-sponsored hacking. There are governments out there who want to spy on other governments. There are organizations that are government or government-related that want to know what you are doing, and therefore there is always an attempt, or there's always groups of people who are going to attempt to break into systems, corporate or personal, to establish what's happening. Individuals are the other threat landscape. For you and I, for those of us who are looking at this from a personal perspective, the individuals are going to be one of the biggest areas of risk. Okay, these are people who are acting on their own. What they really want to do is steal information or target some sort of personal gain. Do not discount that term that many of us have heard many years ago but still exists. That is script kiddies. Script kiddies are literally kids who are playing with scripts to hone their skills, to identify how things work. And they very often run attacks, not so much to cause damage, but just to see that they can. Okay, hacktivists are another key source of attacks. These are people who support a particular cause. They are likely to go after specific types of individuals. Okay, so one of the key examples that I could give you is in the US, for example, with the anti-abortion agenda being big in certain states. Hacktivists are breaking into clinics that are executing abortions, for example. So they break onto systems or steal data to further their activities to get their message across. Cyber terrorists, basically based on ideological or political beliefs, again, breaking into systems to collect or disseminate or destroy data. You then have organized crime. Now, organized crime is increasingly getting linked up with the individual hackers, particularly for people like you and I on an individual level. Okay, organized crime is something we've always associated with perhaps drug trafficking or human trafficking, and down to things like petty theft or organized theft, or even dealing on the streets. What they have significantly branched out into is the digital versions of that. Okay, so the street corner on which the mugging is taking place is actually now inside your laptop or on your child's iPhone, and it's something that we have to be very, very conscious of. And then finally, there are insider threats. This one's more of a corporate thing, and it goes back to my earlier point here, is that it is well known that as many as 59% of employees will steal proprietary data from their employers when they leave. Okay? So that's what that last item is. Now, what are the key areas or threats? I'm going to move on to the next slide. What are the key areas or threats? What are the key things that are going to land on your devices or that you're going to be faced with that are going to cause some sort of damage or some sort of loss or some sort of disruption to you? I've got a number of them here, and I'm going to labor these ones a little bit because here's kind of the meat of it. So the first one is malware. Malware really is any software that is delivered to your device with the intention to either damage the device, disable it, give unauthorized access to it, or then be used as a basis or platform to misuse your device. Okay, it could be a virus, it could be a worm, it could be a Trojan. They are very, very specific terms, but effectively, what you need to understand about malware is it's a piece of software that is delivered somehow to your device, and it can be delivered to any number of devices. If your device is connected, there is the possibility for malware to be delivered to it. Okay. Now, we're thinking again of laptops, desktops, telephones, mobile phones, iPads, tabs, whatever. But you know what? Your Alexa, your Google Home device. For those of you who have smart homes, your connected fridge, my internet connected vehicle, they're all connected to the internet. And what that means is that somewhere, someone out there is going to have the ability or discover the ability of delivering a payload to that device to damage, disable, or give unauthorized access to it. One of the most extreme examples of this that I can think of goes back to approximately 4 years ago at the Detroit Motor Show, where hackers actually demonstrated the ability to hack onto the operating system of a Ford motor vehicle and make its onboard computer go crazy. Now, in that case, what they did was they were able to disable the vehicle. But as we get towards more electronic vehicles, mine will apply the brakes for me if things I'm not paying attention. Imagine if someone delivers a payload onto your car and makes it slam on the brakes with no warning. What sort of damage that could cause? Imagine a Tesla getting taken over, and it might even be another way of kidnapping someone. You take control of their vehicle and you drive them to a remote location. But that's what malware is, and it is a very, very wide realm of software that can be delivered to almost anything. And here's where cybercrime starts. Here's where your risk of being connected to the internet starts, because once that malware lands on your system, there's a very, very wide pool of things that can be done with malware. Ransomware is the next one, and really what it is the modern version of kidnapping. Ransomware is a form of malware. It arrives on your device, and it makes either the hardware or the data on that hardware completely inaccessible until a ransom is paid. Now, there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. Number one, it's very, very easily delivered. Okay, it can be an attachment to a file. It can be an attachment to an email. It can be a link in a message. It can come by email. It can come by WhatsApp. It can even come via an SMS. And you click on the wrong thing or you open the wrong document, and that triggers it. So it's very, very easily delivered. It will cause widespread damage because these things can be made to propagate. They can be made to spread. So a good example of widely propagating malware and ransomware is some of these emails that arrive with a dodgy link on them, or a dodgy looking attachment in them. One of the most common ones is one of the most common ones I've seen in Malaysia is I get an email that appears to be from Inland Revenue, and it says here's the response to your tax return for the year, and you click it, and what it actually does is it does two things. Number one, it sends itself to everybody in your address book, so it's propagated the same thing. It's propagated itself, and at the same time, it captures your system and freezes it, so your entire system is not available to you at all. So the damage can be quite widespread. And the other key point about it is this thing that I've called kill the hostage. Increasingly, in more than 50% of cases, once the ransom is paid, they still don't release your data. The attacker just disappears. Okay, and that is actually an increase. That is a very, very frightening trend. So they take the ransom and they kill the hostage. You are still left without your data, and you are definitely out of pocket as well. You may be left without a working device. Your device may be completely and utterly incapable of being used anymore. So the potential for damage, the potential for loss is really significant. Bots. I talked about bots earlier. What is a bot? It's really a program which automates tasks on the internet. There are lots of good bots that you encounter every day. So when you go to google.com and you type and you type out a search and you click search, that's a bot. It's an automated tool that crawls literally all over the internet and identifies the thing that you're looking for based on your search text. So they are good bots, but they're also very, very bad bots. Okay, they do lots of really suspicious and sneaky things, like gather your passwords, logging keystrokes. One of the earliest bad bots that has existed, and these things have existed since the 1980s, ladies and gentlemen, keystroke loggers. It's pretty easy using malware to deliver deliver a package onto your phone or your iPad or your computer that actually records every keystroke that you put in and sends that back or transmits that back to whoever the attacker is. And in doing that, they are reading everything that you do, and they're also getting all of your passwords, all of your user IDs and your passwords for all of the accounts that you have interacted with. They allow the capture of financial information, they allow for the hijacking of social media accounts, they allow for the use of your email, and they allow for backdoors to be opened onto your system. Okay, some of these things are called Easter eggs or backdoors. Or Trojans, and they reside on your machines quietly, stealthily, and they just reside there, sit there until the attacker decides it's now time for me to make use of that machine. Okay, they can make use of your machine to steal something from it. They can make use of your machine to disable it completely, or they can make use of your machine. Here's the frightening thing: they can make use of your machine to be a front for an attack that they would like to perpetrate on someone else. And unfortunately, in the modern legal environment, or in the current legal environment, an attack on an organization that comes from your machine makes you legally responsible for that attack. And if you think about it, go back to the point I made earlier, where many of these attackers are using encryption to hide themselves. When an attack is traced back, let's say to your machine, and there is no trace backwards from your machine to the original attacker, then the line of legal responsibility kind of stops with you, and it becomes a very, very difficult matter to deal with. Physical attacks. This one is one of the things we got to watch out, particularly for kids. I think most adults will be pretty switched on to this. But a physical attack is really using a hardware or external devices to do the same thing that malware, ransomware, or bots do. Okay, to infect, damage, or compromise systems. The most common of these is things like free USB sticks. You have no idea what is on that free USB stick when it's handed out to you. Or a flashy looking USB stick that is just accidentally discarded or apparently dropped for anyone to pick up. It is an increasingly common trend. It is increasingly the less sophisticated users, probably the more junior users who are gonna fall for this sort of attack. But many a time, these devices are packed with packages that will infect systems. And when it comes to kids, it's going to be more about giving access to the kids, stealing their data, or being able to groom them for more nefarious purposes. And I'll come to that in a moment. We then have social engineering, and social engineering is getting you to hand over your information to the attacker, so that the attacker can then make use of it, impersonate you, or use that information to steal from you. Okay. Now, the thing about it is, a lot of us, especially our kids, kind of social engineer themselves. Okay. They're constantly on Facebook and Instagram. Location sharing is on. Person-to-person conversations are happening. The younger set is doing what you and I did in our diaries that were locked away. They're doing it in public on Instagram. So one of the things that is very, very critical to understand is, although social engineering is a tool or a mechanism designed to get you to part with information that is specific to you, whether it's a credential or log on or some combination of information that allows the attacker to then break into your other systems, a lot of the younger set are happily, readily giving this information out. Okay? One of the things going around on Facebook at the moment is these games, where someone posts and says, here's a game, and this game is going to rate you on the basis of your favorite color, where you live, where you went to school, who your teachers were, and people are responding to that. But if you think about these things that they're asking for, many of them are the answers to your security questions for your logon. Your mum's name, the town you were born in, your favorite color, the kind of pet you had, the name of your pet. This stuff is going on, and kids are getting on the bandwagon because they're trying to outdo each other. But what they're really doing is they're handing over loads and loads of really, really sensitive personal information that may not be sensitive on the face of it, but when it's collected together, it is a very, very powerful tool for an attacker to take over your online identity and pretend to be you, and do all sorts of nefarious stuff, pretending to be someone that they're not. And that trail will come back to you or your child or your teenager. So we've really got to be aware of it. Phishing is an attempt. It is an element of social engineering, but it is very, very specific. It's really sending fake messages to trick you into handing over your information, or to click on a link, or to commit to a transaction. Okay, they're getting good at this. It is becoming increasingly harder to identify a phishing message, but you've got to be switched on to the key telltales. Many times the telltale is actually in the sender's email address, and you've got to look at it really, really carefully. You really have to look at it carefully. There are, I'll give you an example. BDO, we do managed phishing for clients, and what we did was we set up domain names that are maybe one letter away from the client's domain name. Okay, so instead of, and this is a purely generic example, instead of barclaysbank.com, we'll create barclaysbanks.com, and we'll send mails that look like Barclays Bank emails to a host of people and see how many people click on the link. Now, in managed phishing, it just allows us to see how many people respond to it, and then it turns into a training event or a counseling discussion with those people. But you will be surprised at how many people just fail to identify that one letter different, or the misplacement of one letter. The only solution to this is to absolutely get switched on to it. To be aware when something arrives, don't immediately go opening and clicking. Have a close look at it. And it's something that we're going to need to educate our younger set to do, because they're going to start receiving stuff like this. There is a layer of phishing that's not here. It's called spear phishing, and the intention there is to be even more precise. Okay, it becomes very, very directed. Now, I'll give you another example of that. About 2 months ago, I received an email from the firm's chairman, or rather, when it arrived in my inbox, it had the sender name was the name of the firm's chairman. The title was urgent request. And when I opened up the email and I read it, I thought, you know what? This is an unusual request for this gentleman. But when I read the content of the email, it sounded like him. Now I'd like to think a little bit more switched on than the average user. So I will open the email and I'll look at it to decide whether this person is who they say they are. And in this case, the attacker really wanted me to respond by doing two things. Number one, handing over my phone number, and number two, buying certain items on the internet and then arranging to deliver them to the attacker. It sounded odd for the chairman of my firm, but knowing him, it could have been reasonable because of the circumstances of the gentleman. And when I read the email, when I read the use of language and the way the email was written, it sounded like him. But when I looked at the reply to address, I realized it was definitely not our chairman. Okay. So those are the layers, those are the steps that you're going to have to take, that you're going to have to be aware of, because it gets pretty close to home. And it is designed purely to trick you, completely trick you into clicking on that link, opening that attachment, or handing that information over without even thinking about it. So you got to be really, really careful. Now, when it comes to kids, there is a little bit of a generation gap. Kids, teenagers, whatever you want to call them. There is what I'm going to term a generation gap. Here's the generation gap. Now, this is based on a study that was done about 1.5 years ago in the US. So parents were polled on their children's and teenagers' internet use or use of devices. And 87% said they established rules for their kids' internet use. 54% of them felt that they are limited in their ability to monitor and shelter their kids from inappropriate material. That's frightening, because there are actually very, very good means to limit access and monitor and shelter your kids. 69% of parents felt that they knew a lot about what their kids do on the web or on connected devices. And 31% of parents had disciplined their child or children because of the manner of their internet use. But when the same study was then executed on a representative population of teenagers, here's what the kids said. 36% said their parents and guardians had not made rules for them. 41% did not share what they do or where they go on the web. And it's pretty easy to do if you aren't monitoring what your kids are up to. 29% say their parent or guardian would actually disapprove of what they're doing on the internet. So they know they're not supposed to be there, but they're doing it anyway. 29% is almost a third of kids. Counter that with the 54% of parents who feel that they don't have the ability to monitor and shelter their kids. 36% have not discussed how to be safe on the internet with their parent and guardian. And that's the same as the 36% here who says their parents have not made rules, which is, well, it doesn't add up. If 87% of parents say they have established rules, but 36% of kids say they have no rules, that doesn't add up. That's more than 100%. Something's off. And that's the generation gap. What we think we have done may not be reflective enough of what needs to be done. 22% of kids say the computer that they use most often is actually in their bedroom, which increasingly is an absolute no-no. And 73% of them acknowledge that there is a need for kids and teens to learn about internet safety, how to be safe on the internet. What do you share? What do you not share? Where do you go? Where do you not go? And how do you react or not react to people? So there is a gap. There is a communication gap. There is a generation gap. And it's not only about hairstyles and music and attitude to life, but it also has to do with our digital lives. And we've got to be aware of that. Okay. What are kids doing? What are our kids doing online that is potentially exposing them to risks? There's text messaging and email. We know that. There's blogging, right? On the likes of MySpace, Facebook, Instagram should be on this list. They are just not switched on to the fact that the amount of stuff they do with their blogging, the amount of personal and private information that is being given away, makes them prime targets for an attack. And remember this, ladies and gentlemen, particularly when you're working from home, if you have secured your systems well, even if you have secured your systems well, even if you are using the internet wisely, if you have one kid who has allowed their identity or their system to be compromised because of the way they're behaving, and that device is connected to your home network, what you've actually done is you've opened the door for every other device in that network to be potentially compromised as well. It's pretty frightening. Instant messaging, perhaps a little bit older in terms of internet relay chat, but you do have Apple Messenger. We do have WhatsApp. WhatsApp is increasingly being used by commercial entities, particularly with the new changes to it. There is lots and lots of room for improper messages, improper packages, and links that will just compromise systems to go back and forth. Chat rooms are the same. I remember chat rooms being the thing in the late 80s and early 90s, but you know what? They're back. They're back in a very interesting way, really through online gaming. Okay, my 12-year-old sits downstairs in his little den for hours on end playing Fortnite, and he's got the device in front of him. He's plugged in and he's talking to. I'd like to think I know who he's talking to, but I can't be sure all the time. And the only thing left for me to do is to educate him that he needs to be very, very careful as to whom he's interacting with. Because in some of these rooms, you may be talking to your friends, but there may be other people, predators, so to speak, who are in there waiting to identify a child or a teenager and befriend them for absolutely the wrong reasons. Okay, and the risks are clearly aligned with the kind of activity, and the risks are very, very similar, but they are being applied. Here are risks that adults are aware of and would normally know how to deal with, that kids may be a little bit more naive about. Okay, so privacy and identity, who they are, where they are from, who their parents are, what their dates of birth are, where they live, where they go to school. Okay, lots of information that protects the safety and privacy of your kids, that also has an impact on the privacy and safety of yourself and your family as a whole, could be changing hands or going from mouth to mouth in some of these spaces without you realizing it. So you need to get your kids up to speed. You need to make them aware, even frighten them of what the risks are. Email attachments, I talked about that. Sharing of personal information. The youngsters do this at the drop of a hat. The sheer volume and detail of personal information that is shared is, quite frankly, frightening, because they don't understand the risks of doing so. Okay, it may be shared by one kid to his or her classmate, but they have no control then over who the classmate goes on and shares it with, and the propagation is fast. It gives rise to identity theft. It gives rise to fraud or scams. It gives rise to cyber predators who approach and groom children for inappropriate activities and also for inappropriate content. Finally, there could be copyright violations and bullying and harassment that happens online. Okay? These are the things that go hand in hand with being on the internet, being in chat rooms, being on Facebook, being on Instagram, for example, and the increasing phenomenon of connected gaming, where people interact with each other purely on the games. So what do we do about this? How do we protect ourselves? There are 4 layers at which we need to protect ourselves, and these layers, I'm going to go through them in a certain order, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in this order. But there are 4 families of things that you need to look at to protect yourself. The first is your equipment. Update it. When you get when you get those Windows update messages, or the Android updates, or the app updates, I know a lot of people who say to me, "Hey Sanjay, the updates tie up my bandwidth, and then they create lots of temporary files, and my phone bloats and slows down." There are ways to clean it. Most phones, most devices have a cleanup after the update, but these updates have very, very critical security patches that are based on having identified vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited by attackers, to basically attack those devices, or steal information. So never, ever, ever ignore the updates when they come down the pipe. Migrate your equipment when necessary. All of the main manufacturers will make it plainly clear that at some point they will stop providing new updates to a piece of equipment. What that means is that you're no longer as protected as you could be on that piece of equipment. It's time to migrate. It's time to retire the piece of equipment and move on to something else. Okay. If you can, encrypt your device. Okay. Your mobile phones, your laptops, your iPads, your tabs, whatever they are, they all have the ability to be encrypted to some extent, or at the very least, you have the ability to secure it with a key lock or a password. Do that. Do not ever have a device that is unprotected at the basic level of getting onto it. And if that device is an onboard firewall, by all means, enable it. Okay, firewalls do a great job. If they're kept up to date, they do a great job of blocking off some of the attacks, or at the very minimum, they'll prompt you that something or a piece of software is trying to do something. Do you want to let it go on or not? It may seem like a nuisance, but believe me, it's a good nuisance. The network at home, secure it. Secure it with a strong password. And, we all have these routers that, whether it's Unify or Maxis, we all have these routers that are delivered to us. I don't know how many of us change the password, but you should. It should be a secure password. And every now and again, do check who's on. I hear a lot of people say to me, "You know what, my internet's pretty slow today." And when I hear that, I usually think to ask, have you checked how many devices are connected to your network? Do you know what all those devices are and what they're doing? And finally, if one of those devices is doing something odd, have you considered the possibility that that device has been compromised in some shape or form? And that compromise is about to get propagated to everything else in your network. So it's important to periodically get into your router, to check who's on there. Check who's on there, to check what sort of traffic is going back and forth on it, because it could be an indicator that someone's already broken in. We talked about the password. The password should be, there are rules of thumbs and passwords. It should be sufficiently strong. It should be well protected, because people will try to use your network. The most innovative, I guess, and one of the most effective tools that I remember coming across a couple of years ago was the Pringles potato chip tin, that someone had basically taken the cap off it, put a cable at the back end of it, so it became this long tube, and it's filled with tin foil. It is filled with tin foil. It's lined with tin foil, and that's the way the thing's manufactured. And just that contraption, the Pringles potato chips tin with a cable at the end of it connecting to a laptop, has been known to pick up a Wi-Fi network from as far as 3 kilometers away. Okay, so someone doesn't have to be sitting down your street or in your home or outside your office to get onto your Wi-Fi network. They can be as far as 3 kilometers away. I mean, geography and topography comes into play, but there is the ability to get onto your home network, to get onto your Wi-Fi from quite a distance away, if it is inappropriately secured. So that's something you definitely need to do. Then there's you yourself, the knowledge and awareness, sort of the stuff that we've gone through today. And Have you considered insurance? If you are a home-based business, have you considered cyber-related risk insurance for yourself and your information to defray some of the potential cost in case you get attacked? Okay. And then finally, the kids. Okay. I've touched on a lot of this already, but when it comes to kids, the knowledge and awareness has to be given to them. We've got to sit our kids down and talk to them about the dangers of being connected. What kind of people? I mean, we've all talked to our kids about speaking to strangers. We've talked about, my kid has a password. That's cool. So if someone shows up to pick him up, he's got a password to challenge the person with him. They don't have the password, he isn't going with them. Same thing with their digital presence. They've got to have the same knowledge and awareness of how to secure themselves. As parents, I recommend you know their passwords. You know what tools and devices and software they use. You should know where they go. You're kind of spying on them, yeah, but you got to know where they go and know what they do. Okay. Now we talk about having antivirus software. We talk about having firewall software. Bundled in many of these items is now also parental control software that allows you to monitor what your kids are doing and block where they go. It doesn't work on certain things because, for example, on iPhones and iPads, Apple has its own parental control measures that, if I recall correctly, about 2 years ago was broken into by a 13-year-old, but it's there. There are ample bits of software. I use one in the home. It's not that expensive. I think I pay, if I recall correctly, I think I pay $100 every 2 years. And it protects 10 devices, including the ability to track that device to see what that device physically is, remotely lock it, and even remotely wipe it. Okay. My son's mobile phone has a little button on it that is a panic button that he can tap on to indicate that he's in trouble. It prompts him so that when he arrives in school or the tuition center, it prompts him to tap a button, and that tells me he's arrived safely at where he's supposed to go. It allows me to create zones on a map, and it will inform me if my kid goes outside a certain zone. Okay. Yes, you're spying on them, but we kind of need to. We live in that environment, physically as well as electronically. We've got to observe their behavior, and we really should be having the devices in public family areas. Okay. Again, for example, my kid gets to use his devices in the living room, in the family room. Doesn't go to his bedroom. It goes to my bedroom when he goes to bed. You put all of this together and you've begun to protect yourself, your network, your equipment, and your kids in terms of their activities on the web and your activities on the web. Because again, I'm going to stress this once again, it takes one device on your network, okay, to be compromised through some shape or form. And that opens the door to every other device being compromised. And there is then very little limit to what can be stolen, misused, or abused by a potential attacker. And if you think about it, the number of devices that are connected to your system, that to your network at home, that carry some sort of tool or some sort of intelligence that could be corrupted. Okay. Simple one, your smart TV. Imagine if a hacker breaks in through your kid's phone and somehow or other is able to freeze up your smart TV and render it unusable. You'd be going out to buy a new one. It could be as simple as that, but it could result in a significant cost. Okay. Final slide, a final piece on passwords. I can't stress this enough. Passwords are really, really one of the key things that we do to protect ourselves, that we have to protect ourselves. And most of us, well, those of us who are in corporate environments are kind of forced to have certain types of passwords. But outside of the corporate environment, many of us get kind of lazy, and we shouldn't really be. We need to get in the mode of doing this right. So what are some of the key messages for passwords? Try and have a different one for each system. Yes, it does mean that you have quite a lot of passwords to remember, but they are tools and mechanisms to make passwords memorable. I'll come to that in a minute. Okay. They should really be as long as they can be. Um, the days of 6 character, 8 character passwords are long gone. If I recall correctly, an 8 character real word password can be broken in a couple of hours by tools that are available to hackers today. So try and get them as long as they can be. And there is this thing called the passphrase. So it's no longer a password, it's a phrase. Okay. The dog came home last year, for example. That's a passphrase. It is pretty long. It may mean nothing to anyone other than you. And that's what starts to make passwords memorable, even though you have lots and lots of them. You pick a phrase, or you pick certain combinations of characters and numbers that mean something to you, you will remember them, right? And they will be increasingly difficult for an attacker to break into. It has to be the complexity, of course, the mix of uppercase, lowercase numbers, and characters. You can easily build that in. There are substitution mechanisms, right? The sky is blue. You can replace the S with the number 5. You can replace the letter L with a number 7. Things like that. So there's ways to bring in the complexity. I talked about this. Consider a passphrase, build the complexity into the passphrase, and it becomes something that you easily remember and is not easy for someone else to guess. Change them often, but there is increasing research that shows that the longer your password is, the more complex it is, and the more it goes towards an oblique phrase, the less often you need to change it. Okay, so there is a trade-off. There is a trade-off. I mean, at a corporate level, I remember having to change a password every 30 days. We are now, for example, at BDO, we're now in a space where our passwords have to be, I think, a minimum of 12 characters, and they have all these complexity requirements, and we now only need to change them every 90 days. Okay, so there is a trade-off. And it's a trade-off that you need to find that suits you when it comes to your personal passwords. Consider the use of a password manager. We have so many passwords today. You have so many that you have to change at different intervals. You don't want to be writing them down. Please never write them down. But they are very, very good tools. A lot of them free, very, very secure, that are basically password managers. It's a place where you can securely store your passwords for reference. I have one on my phone. It's got a list of all my accounts and passwords. It's secured by one master password, and it's free. It's absolutely free. So you can be happy to share some of the information on that. So on that note, one final thing. We have entered the realm where you can do away with your password altogether. I don't know how many of you have heard this, and most of you are now thinking, hey, Sanjay's gone absolutely barking mad. But I assure you I have not. Microsoft earlier this month issued a notice to all of its users that it's time to delete your password altogether. How do you do that? Microsoft, along with a lot of other providers, have something called authenticator apps right now. So you don't actually need a password. You go onto you come onto your computer, you attempt to log on, and instead of getting prompted for a password, your computer will prompt you to go, and I'm going to try and show you this. It will prompt you. Let's see where. It will prompt you to go to your authenticator app, and I have an authenticator app right here. I'm going to tap on it. And it's taking a minute to launch. There you go. That's an authenticator app. It wants my thumbprint before I can get on it. And when I give it my thumbprint, you see, you see a number of accounts there. And that authenticator app will say to me, have you attempted to log on to that machine? When I say yes, it just logs me on. There is no longer a need for a password. We're getting away from passwords in their entirety, which means that there is less and less opportunity for potential attackers to break onto our systems. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me. I think I've run on a bit. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you have learned a little bit that is new, I guess. I hope you've found this useful, and I'll look forward to taking questions now.
Okay, thank you, Sanjay. So there are questions that's coming up. I did have some questions that's coming up. Let me see. Adiba has actually one question here. Let me show it on the screen here.
Yep.
Yeah, she put a little emoji there. So she's like, PDPA, cyber law and
Cyber
evidence
law.
act of Malaysian law it's not really effective here. Actually said since these people are unknown third party, it's hard to sue them for defamation, for example.
You're absolutely right, Adiba. You're absolutely right. We don't really have cyber laws. We do have an evidence act. That evidence act is actually pretty good. The problem is getting to trace the source of the particular attack or the breach. PDPA, unfortunately, our PDPA has no teeth whatsoever. Heck, I still remember about 2 years ago receiving an SMS blast from MCMC saying, please go and vote. And that was MCMC, which is the keeper of the PDPA, actually actively spamming just about every Malaysian citizen by giving what was so-called a public service message. So yeah, our PDPA is a bit weak in that respect. It's pretty well put together, but I do not see it at all being enforced in the way that it should be. The sorts of penalties that we're talking about, the prosecutions aren't happening, and when they do happen, the penalties that are being applied are so insignificant that it's actually not funny. So you are absolutely right, Adiba. We do have laws in place, but they just aren't being enforced properly enough. And I'll leave you to speculate on why that is. Which means that we just then need to be safe and protect ourselves. Consider whether you really need to be on that website. When I tried to buy movie tickets online from one of our cinema chains, and they wanted my name, my address, my date of birth, and my IC number just to buy a cinema ticket, I said, no, I am not buying my tickets online from you. And I will now consider whether I'm going to buy tickets at your cinema at all. And it's going to be the acts of us, the users, that are going to get corporations to get their personal privacy mechanisms in place. We're all too willing to hand over. I mean, in Malaysia, you have someone's IC number. You also have their date of birth. You have their IC. You have that. You can go to the register of voters. You will have their postcode. You will then have their full name, their postcode, and their date of birth. Those are 3 pieces of information that allow you to apply for a credit card in that person's name and abuse it. Think about it. You hand that over to buy a newspaper or a cinema ticket online? I don't think so, but we're doing it. So it's just be aware. Be very, very aware of what you're doing.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I can see there's a lot of people here also because with Sanjay's really be nice to, give us more information to everybody else as well. So those of you here, I do know that would have to leave, right? I just put it in the comment box that where you can find Sanjay if you want to connect with him on LinkedIn and on what BDO actually does as well. There is inside, I've put it in the chat box as well. For us in People Hive, if you like to have any other topics for the next other Save My Sanity webinar, please click what you want to learn and we'll try to get the speakers. And as well as any in our social media, just like us, and we will actually update you. However, for Sanjay, if you just have like one more,
Sure.
probably a little
Sure,
bit, there's one
Yep.
more question here. And I'm just not seeing any more questions. So for those of you who have to go, thank you very much for joining us. Or those of you who would still want to ask questions, we'll probably give another 3 minutes for you to quickly type in anything you want before we end. And we'll just answer one question in the meantime. I think Adiba also asked what we can do in the social media era. I believe that this was also answered a little bit kind of in your previous presentations as well, right?
Yeah, I think I've already covered that, and Adiba, I think what you mean here, I'm guessing, is what do we do to protect ourselves? I've kind of answered that. The other thing that you really need to do is consider what you share. Carefully consider what you share. When you are using apps like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, please be aware of all the privacy and security settings that you can make on these apps and in these websites, and make sure you've set them. Particularly if you have kids, particularly if you're sharing information on kids. Be very, very aware of the functionality that's available to limit what people see, so that you can keep that circle close. Remember, if there is a conversation that you would only have with your spouse and your kids, or with your wider family, and you want to put a comment of that sort on your Facebook, remember to check who can see that, and whether it's only your wider family that can see it, or your circle of friends that can see it. We need to be very, very much more switched on as to how we deny access to our comments and our thoughts, and our postings. We deny access to those, to the people that we really don't want seeing them.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And thank you, Adiba, for the question. So right now it's actually to the end of our webinar. Once again, thank you so much to all the viewers, and thank you so much to Sanjay for, really sharing this and helping a community as well. Thank you so very much. It's really my honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chantal, for well, it's been an honor for me to be approached and to be asked to speak to this audience. So thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been a blast for me, believe me.
Well, thank you so much to all of you guys out there. You know what you need to do and not to do. There's a lot of things out there. It's not only staying safe about COVID and everything else. There is also the internet danger right now that we can't see. So please do be careful. Take care and stay safe, everyone. Bye.